Hello supervisors, and welcome to this screencast on the EPQ presentation. As you can see from my subheading, I've called it a celebration of the journey. And that's my first point, is that the presentation is not a summary of the research. It's a complete account, as you will see, of the whole journey that the student has gone through during the EPQ. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover the structure of the presentation. I'm going to talk about some of the logistics due to the COVID pandemic and how we're going to get around those at the moment. I'm going to remind you about the assessment criteria because this does count towards the grade. Roughly speaking, we're thinking maybe about 20% of the grade. Then I'm going to cover effective use of slides, the creative hook, and taking questions. Now these are things that the students will have covered in my EPQ lessons, but it's well that you know about them so that when you actually look at the practice presentation, you know what kind of feedback and advice to give them. Very importantly, we're going to talk about recording the presentation because it needs to be saved. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about the paperwork that you'll need to do on Project Q. So, first of all, the guidelines for the presentation that come from AQA. This is what they tell us, that you need to cover what their project is about, the reasoning that underpins the project, their aims and objectives, what research has been undertaken and why, a review of the performance and achievements, the lessons they've learned, and how their product might affect their future career or education. These last two are really important because, as we'll see when we go back to the assessment criteria, the evaluation and review skills are absolute key to success on the EPQ. Now, in terms of the logistics of how this is going to be delivered, as you know, normally we would have an EPQ presentation evening. Now everything must be online. So we're looking at Zoom or Teams. I know the school policy is to use Teams, but I'm probably going to go for Zoom because many of the students will want external people to join and be part of this presentation. So they might want parents or grandparents in England. And I do find that Zoom is easier at getting invitations accepted. So the presentation is going to be 15 to 20 minutes long. There needs to be 10 minutes for questions, and that's very important. I'm going to go through that a little bit more. The presentation must be recorded, and I absolutely implore you to check this over and over again. And after it's recorded, it's going to need to be saved as an MP4, and I'm going to need to store these because we need them as evidence in the future. The student will need to write a speech, as I say here, but during the presentation we do not want them to be reading. We would like them to commit this speech more or less to memory and simply to use cue cards as an aide-memoire. The speech itself is designed to inform, as I say, but also to entertain. So we want to think of it as a piece of rhetoric, as a piece of public speaking, in addition to being information. The audience is non-specialist, so whereas the written report is often very, very technical and shows subject mastery, the presentation should leave out all of the difficult and highly technical language and instead be designed for the general public. And the student finally should get an audience in excess of 5 people. That would be really the minimum that we can allow. I'm not going to go into the assessment objectives in a lot of detail, but I'm just going to remind you that this is a great opportunity for students to score across all 4 assessment criteria. So they can show how they manage the project, evidence of their planning. They can talk about their sources and how they treated them critically. They can show, develop and realize skills AO3 by talking about how they made decisions and achieved planned outcomes and showed resilience and problem solving, etc. And finally, they can show evaluation skills where they critique their performance. So the presentation really is an ideal opportunity for them to reflect upon these assessment criteria and to think, how are they going to address all 4 of these AOs? Now, in terms of what I teach them, we all know, and we've all struggled with death by PowerPoint. You're probably going through it as I speak now. Now, as a rule, 80% of the information I teach them must be on their notes or on their cue cards. They're not allowed to read. We all know that this is criminally boring. I would suggest that they record themselves, unlike myself in this screencast, in the corner of the screencast so that the examiner can see that they're there. And really eye contact there and normal public speaking things will be really important. So the idea is that they use the slides to anchor the speech and that they're not simply reading through it. And as I say there, as a rule, fewer slides and more speaking would be absolutely key. The slides also mustn't be packed with information. Once again, we've all sat with somebody reading from a slide and we feel like killing them. So as you can see from this particular slide here, too much detail, cut it down. Images, smaller tables like this can be extremely valuable. We see that this is a light slide and the student then can indicate the data that they think is well worth emphasizing. Moving on. Keeping it simple will be our message, okay? Not too much animation, etc. Too many visual effects. That said, things like a video clip might be very, very powerful. Some students do choose to make their own little movie that they'll insert into the presentation. Some students use beautiful music, for instance. Some students might use video clips or clips from history or even from drama products, etc. So you can be creative as long as you're not simply supplying too much pyrotechnics. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This particular photo always breaks my heart. I can't think of any more moving an image of what starvation in Africa looks like. I'm using this as an example to show how powerful visuals are in the presentation. So if students simply want to have a visual as their slide, that is superb. If I placed information over this, I think it would kill the power and the poignancy of this particular image. So it's very important that students consider the value, the power of images. As ever, this is absolutely key to any kind of public speaking. Establishing a creative hook, making the audience see the value of your research and how it's going to impact upon their life. So the creative hook is something that students might want to begin with, and that could be a whole variety of things, as I say here, striking illustration, as I've shown above with my picture. They could, of course, have a piece of video. They could create an environment. They can get their audience to do an activity if necessary. Really, the sky is the limit, but the important thing is that the presentation is engaging, and that will be part of the marks. So do encourage them to be as creative as possible. I've included this one because it's a very good example of how a presentation can be made interesting. So this was a highly technical presentation that a student showed me on silver nanoparticles. It had all sorts of scientific detail in etc. And so as I worked with her, we reduced this technical detail because this is not the report, this is the presentation. And what we wanted to do was make this meaningful to people in the audience. And so in our research, what we discovered is that silver nanoparticles are now one of the main alternatives to antibiotics. And as you can see here, there's flesh-eating bacteria. You could have a shocking video if you so wanted. We always know that people are completely freaked out by images of hideous disease. So rather than beginning with silver nanoparticles, which for most of us are very difficult to conceptualize, we don't really know what they are and why they matter to us, we could talk about the horror of disease. And that to me then establishes the creative hook and allows the student to then go into the subject of silver nanoparticles, but there's a powerful narrative to motivate our interest, I should say. I've also given students this extremely useful checklist from the University of Southampton, and I would encourage you to go through them this with them. It gives them a way of structuring the preparation of their presentation because they're going to have to show that this is carefully thought out. Now, what is your role, the supervisor's role in this presentation? I thought I'd go through this very carefully so that you know exactly what you should do. So obviously you're going to set up the Zoom or the Teams or whatever it is, and you are going to introduce the presentation. Please, I cannot stress enough how important that it is recorded. Make sure that it's recording. Make sure that the mics are working and that the student isn't muted, etc. We have to have evidence of it afterwards. So it has to be, as I said, saved in the form of an MP4. You need to think as the student delivers the presentation, or you could do this before if you've seen a practice version of it. Think of the questions you're going to ask, because your role of the supervisor is to direct these questions. And to do that, I'm just briefly going to go back just to remind you of the value of the assessment objectives. So when I'm a supervisor, I tend to have the assessment objectives in front of me, and I think to myself, I will make sure that either myself or the audience will ask a question which covers each of these things so that the student can score the maximum number of marks possible. Okay, you may want to take some notes during the presentation, or you can just rely on your memory. And so you will start off the question when the student gives you the cue and says, I've now finished and I'll take questions. And you will also just direct the members of the audience and say who can answer the question and make sure that the questions are flowing. That's your job as the supervisor. You'll also end the presentation, and then of course you'll end the recording and make sure that it's saved, and then save it as an MP4. And in the future I'll give you further instructions. I'll create a space on our OneDrive for us to save all of those presentations. Because as I say, the exam board can ask for them, and they will certainly be looking for evidence that this presentation was given and that it was given live. That's something that they've clarified to me. Now, in terms of Project Q, which is the production log, on the student side, the student has to show all of their planning, and it would be great if you could check this. They should break down their slides here. They should think about writing a little bit about how they're going to create visual impact and just showing that it's been really carefully planned. The student also has to print off all the slides and keep evidence of their speech, and that will be an appendices that goes with the project. Now, what's your job? The supervisor side is presentation record B, which you can find here on Project Q. Now, I don't try and type this out while the student is delivering the presentation. I know from experience that that's completely impossible. So you could either watch a recording again, or you could take some notes as the student delivers the presentation. And you're going to fill in this, how many people are there, etc. Very importantly, on the bottom section, it asks for evidence of questions. Please, could you have at least 4 questions down there? And as I said, be mindful of the assessment criteria. This is an opportunity for you to record evidence of the ability to give grades for the different assessment criteria. So now, in conclusion, I think I've spoken enough and you'll all be getting tired of my voice. Planning and delivery are absolutely crucial for this presentation. It's a very important part of the EPQ assessment. It goes together with the production log and the essay to form the whole. The assessment criteria need to guide your questions. Please make sure that the students are making effective use of their slides. They should also include signposting and subheadings so that the presentation is well structured and easy to follow. Delivery will be crucial, and that's why the students need to practice with you or with peers so that they're very fluent when they deliver the presentation. Remember the importance of the creative hook and of entertainment, and above all, please remember to save the presentation. Thank you so much for your support. Without you, the EPQ could not run in desk, and I can't thank you enough, and I know the students are truly grateful to you.